It's great to welcome back to the program today David Sirota, who is a journalist, columnist, and founder and editor of The Lever, which you can find at levernews.com. It's been a little while since we had you on, and you've been busy, but it's really great to have you on.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, I mean, let's just kind of start at the top here. What was the goal with creating The Lever? What are the issues in the media landscape that you're hoping to solve or improve upon or address?
Sure. I mean, I had been working for Bernie Sanders as his speechwriter on the 2020 presidential campaign, but before that, I spent many years as a journalist. And after the campaign, I decided to do some writing, and I'd actually started out as just a small Substack, but there was a lot of reader support for it, and so I teamed up with a reporter that I had formerly worked with, Andrew Perez, to start doing some actual reporting, and from there it kind of grew. And look, I think that what our focus is, what a Lever story is a story that's about it's about following the money. It's about following the power. Our our mission is to actually change the conversation and change the policies in this country. So we don't pretend to just be, reporting whatever is going on. Our reporting is accountability journalism designed to hold politicians accountable when it comes to issues that deal with money and power. So, for instance, in the last month or so, we broke open the story of the deregulatory decisions that were made on rail safety in the lead up to the East Palestine, Ohio derailment.
Yep.
This week we spent a lot of time breaking open stories about the regulatory decisions that were made to deregulate Silicon Valley Bank, what were the decisions made by politicians for which donors. So we are constantly asking the question, who are public officials actually serving? We are constantly spotlighting that. So with the idea that the more that the readership knows, the more that the readership can be engaged to actually pressure their lawmakers to make better decisions.
So, how is this funded? Because one of the interesting things is, particularly when the focus is to follow the money and to have accountability, my guess is you have to be particularly careful about following the money when it comes to your organization as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're reader supported. We work with other media outlets like Jacobin, as an example, syndicates our work. Some of our work appears in The Guardian. So we have a kind of we're small, right? So we're trying to build out, but we are a reader supported news organization that holds them accountable, holds them being the proverbial them, meaning corporations, politicians, and the like. And I think that what you'll see is that on our stories, one thing that I'm really proud of on our stories is I think when you read our stories, you don't have to trust us, right? Because what we do in every story, and we take a lot of time to do this, is to link to all of the primary sources in which we are referring to. So I say this all the time. If you read one of our stories, oh, Sirota's this, Sirota's that. Hey, listen, that's fine. You can believe whatever you want about me. The links to the source materials are all there for you to evaluate. I fully believe in I don't even believe in trust but verify. I believe first and foremost in verify.
Right.
So when you read one of our stories, when you see it linked to all that source material, that's because we're trying to show the reader, hey, listen, if you don't trust us about a statement, an assertion that we make here, a statement of fact that we make here, you can go fact check us. I mean, we have a vigorous fact checking process in what we do. But that's the point here, is that I think that we, in a lot of ways, in media, the media ecosystem has gotten away from that, which has created an environment in which people can say, oh, that's, quote unquote, fake news. So the way we combat that is to try to present all of our facts and be very open and transparent about that. So you can debate, this or that about the writer or about the publication, but you can't debate the documents and facts.
What are your thoughts on whether there can be other funding methods for organizations like yours or mine or larger media or whatever that you find journalistically ethical or kosher or whatever word you might want to apply to it, in the sense of, if there's any kind of advertising, is that necessarily a problem, or does it depend on the subject matter that is being covered and the types of products and services being advertised? Or like what other models are okay in your mind?
It's a great question. I mean, to my mind, we don't have corporate ads
Right.
and the like, but I'm not a purist when it comes to this. I'm not a purist when it comes to foundation funding. I'm not a purist when it comes to, individual donors. I think that we live in a world of, unfortunately, where getting resources to do public interest journalism, there is no public funding for that in any kind of institutional level. There is, in a sense, of crowdsourcing it, but that is a very, very tough road. It's a worthwhile road. We are on that road as an entity. So it's hard for me to create hard and fast rules, other than to say this: I think being reader supported at some capacity is important, and having that be a major pillar of a media organization is extremely important for many reasons. One of which is you want to be serving a readership, and at least have that be a huge pillar of who you are answering to for the resources to do journalism. I also think that having reader support is actually, over the long haul, if you can do it, is actually more stable. In the sense of a lot of comparatively small contributors becomes a more stable funding base than one or two or three huge funders or huge corporations that can wake up on a given day and just pull funding, right? So I think there's a stability issue there.
Yeah, one of the things about that's interesting, which I've talked with my audience about, and I think most recently somewhere between 38 and 40% of our total revenue comes from direct subscriptions from people in the sort of style you're talking about, is it's on the one hand of it, Bob and Brenda can directly support the work I'm doing rather than whoever else, corporate entity or whatever. On the other side of it, because Bob and Brenda are just two people who I love, Bob and Brenda are great, they're also not going to be able to get me to change what I'm doing with the threat that they will pull their $5 a month.
That's absolutely right. I mean, it's a kind of diversified portfolio model, which is what I like. And maybe the hard and fast rule is kind of this: is that if you have a diversified funding base, resource base that is not singularly reliant on any of the categories, that is, I think, the ideal. I mean, the ideal is to have it be purely individual, small, subscription based to fund a giant newsroom. I don't think anybody has been able to do that yet, and maybe we're on our way to that. Who knows? But no one has really, to my mind, has really been able to do exactly that. So one level down from that is, okay, how can I put together some major donors, foundations, not nonprofit foundations, a subscription base, so that the publication doesn't have to singularly answer to any one of those entities. That's about as independent, I think. I mean, that's pretty good. And again, I'm not a purist on this. What I want to see is, I mean, right now we live in a world, of course, that's so far from pure. We live in a world where media is dominated by huge corporate entities with either, singular billionaires at the top of them, Bloomberg News and the like, or massive corporations that are making the decisions. Those aren't really diversified at all. It's very clear who they answer to. In fact, some of these publications put right underneath the top of their articles, presented by Chevron. Right now, there's, I guess in some ways, kudos to them for at least being transparent
Sure.
About that. But they're also being explicit about who they actually serve. And I think ultimately you can see the independence of media by the content that the media is producing. I go back to what we produce. I don't think anybody could read what we do and say, oh, we go easy on this or that entity or this or that faction for this or that reason. I mean, we are trying to follow the money no matter where it goes. I mean, we have been critical of the Progressive Caucus at times. We have obviously been critical of the Republicans at times. We've been critical of corporate Democrats at times. And when I say we've been critical, what I mean is our reporting is holding them accountable. It's not just us going out and saying, you know, they're jerks or whatever. It's us actually holding them accountable.
And last thing on this, I think even though we have a lack of media literacy in some senses in this country, a lot of media consumers intuitively can tell the difference between when Deepwater Horizon is going on, Anderson Cooper goes to a break and there's a BP ad, right, on the one hand. And then on the other hand, in an article that you do about the derailment, there might be you recommending a shaving razor or something like that. I think people would be able to distinguish which one is potentially directly related to the stories that are being reported and how versus things that are not.
That's absolutely right. So when people ask me, you know, would you ever take, you know, advertising? Would you ever, you know, I'm like, well, would I ever take advertising from Chevron? No, right? That's problematic. But I think there's huge gradations, and I want to reiterate this. I truly don't think purity, and I'm putting that in quotes, is a way to look at this. If we want to build a healthy, independent media in a country that does not offer institutional public funding for media,
right,
we're going to have to try to find models and formulas that allow us to do that, and where it doesn't take 15 or 20 years to build out fully an individual subscriber base that can support a 100, 200, 300 person newsroom. Like climate change is not waiting for us to do that. And look, I'm really proud of the reader support that we have. I'm really encouraged by the grassroots reader support that other independent media like your show, like other shows have been able to generate in recent years. It is a long, hard slog. It is inherently a long, hard slog, and we don't have time to wait.
I was going to talk a little bit about sourcing, but I think it might be more interesting instead to get your thoughts about nuance, maybe is the way I would put it. You know, one of the things that's really tough with stories that are more complicated than the simplest of simplest stories, which is really most of them, is that oftentimes when you introduce nuance or you revise your views, you are potentially accused of either flip-flopping or you were originally lying or you're backpedaling or whatever the case may be. This comes up a lot of times with messages I get about COVID vaccines, but David, you said one thing in 2021 and now you're saying something else, and you have to sort of explain, well, listen, the vaccine in 2021, based on the variant that was out there, was very effective at preventing transmission and infection. The virus that is out there has changed. The vaccines have been updated, and it is now more a tool for preventing death and hospitalization and not really a tool for preventing. Oh, so you're backpedaling. What's the best way for people in my position or in your position to deal with this, bearing in mind that we always want to be communicating the best information we have at the time, and we want to be completely honest, but we also know that the appetite for nuance is maybe more limited than we would like it to be?
That's a really, really great question. Well, first and foremost, I think we have to understand that there is a learning process. That as we learn new information, conclusions will change. I mean, that's part of the human experience. Anybody who doesn't want to learn new information and thus change conclusions you're heading straight into denialism, right? So I don't think media should participate in any kind of denialism at all. I think the other point about this is actually to what we try to do in our reporting. I always say this to my reporters, is to state what we know as a fact right now.
Yeah.
Don't foreclose on the idea that the facts in the future can change, but also don't say things that are not grounded in facts that can't be verified. So, you know, did X lead to Y? Did this deregulation lead to this disaster? You can only really say that if you can prove it. But you can say these senators or these lawmakers ignored warnings about this outcome to cast votes for that kind of deregulation, and then this happened.
Right.
Now, so my point is that that's a nuance, but it's an important point. As long as you're saying what can be factually verified, I think that's the obligation, and that is the job of journalism, is to say what we know to be true without speculating or extrapolating. It's when you get into extrapolating ahead in the future that it becomes problematic. Then it can become, I hate this term, but then it can become susceptible to the charge of quote unquote fake news.
Yeah.
Nothing is fake news if you're stating in this document or on this day, this thing happened, and you can pretend it didn't happen, but that's like pretending the sky isn't blue. That's, to me, the role of the journalist.
Yeah, and to stick with the COVID examples, that was frequently, it came up when people would call me about hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin or whatever. And I'm not going to say this does not work. What I can tell you is we don't have the type of evidence now that medical science requires to say that it works. Could that evidence be presented in the future from a study that hasn't yet been done? Sure. But of course, again, it's all about whether the audience you have is receptive to that. And I think part of hopefully what we are doing is cultivating such an audience that understands those nuances.
Absolutely. And I think that's actually part of, there's kind of like what we're doing on a day-to-day basis,
right?
Reporting a story on Silicon Valley Bank, reporting a story on the decisions in the lead up to the East Palestine disaster. But I think over the long haul, what we're also doing, what independent media is doing, is saying that media needs to go back, not that everything was better before, but there needs to be a reconnection with the idea that media's job is to hold accountable those of all parties without regard to party, without regard to kind of tribal politics. We're going to hold people accountable to the facts as we know them now. And if the facts change in the future, or there's new facts that arise, we're going to report on those too.
We've been speaking with David Sirota, who's founder and editor of The Lever. You can find more at levernews.com. Always appreciate your time and insights.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.